Thank you for tuning in to Beehive Solve Cases, where we put a sting back into cold cases from around the world. Teleka Patrick was brilliant, beautiful, and highly accomplished. How can she go from being this brilliant doctor to now being labeled with this undiagnosed mental illness? Was she on any medication for this so called illness? Did anyone know she was taking any medication? Did her ex husband see her taking any medication? Did her family and her friends see Dr. Talika taking any medication for mental illness? Is there a paper trail from any doctors saying that she was under their care and on medication for mental illness? Or did someone hide in the shadows, plotting her demise before she knew what hit her? On August the 6th, 2014, Talika Patrick's body was found. After going missing December the 5th, 2013, 2 weeks after her disappearance, the Radisson Plaza Hotel and Suites in Kalamazoo released video footage of Patrick trying unsuccessfully to book a room. She received a ride back to her car at Borders Medical Center and was last seen leaving the hospital in her 1997 Lexus ES300. Rumors began to surface about Talika suffering from mental illness, and who would bring this to light was the man Talika Patrick once made a vow to love until death do them apart. What disturbed me about the husband was the fact no one asked him or questioned him about her disappearance, but he found himself placing himself before the media, alleging Patrick's mental illness, which led to her divorce. Let's take a quick listen at Talika's ex husband giving information to News 8.
Teleka and I met online. Ismail Calderon doesn't dispute what we've heard about Teleka Patrick, the vivacious, God-loving, and intelligent woman who was seen in all the pictures. She did everything to the T. She was a perfectionist. Teleka was very true-hearted when it came to her faith, and her belief in God was rock solid. But he says there was a deeper issue behind the talent, intellect, and beauty that Teleka refused to address. What he says were telltale signs of mental illness. She started to have delusions, paranoia. She started to hear voices. It was hard for even him to face, and he says all of her talent and a distinct passion for hearing the voice of God further complicated the issue. They just covered up and suppressed what she was fighting so much. Maybe the voices that she heard wasn't God. Maybe the voices that she heard pointed to a serious condition. Calderon says he and Teleka went to marriage counseling, but that was about it. And he claims it would be his pressure to get her into treatment that started the demise of their marriage. I think that Teleka had this fear of first being branded with a mental illness. Second, the practical fear of losing her career. Reports that Teleka seemed agitated and afraid during the last time she was known to be seen don't surprise him. He says he also witnessed firsthand that erratic driving reported on the highway before Teleka's Lexus was found in Indiana. He says he suspects she was in a delusion, fearing someone was chasing her. It's what happened next that has him confused. I believe it's a serious concern because every day that she's still missing, it's a danger. Plain and simple, he says, Teleka just wouldn't go this long without contacting the family she loves. This is a tragedy. I don't think she's hiding somewhere. I think she's being held against her will, or the worst, or even worse than that. It's horrible to think that something bad may have happened to her. Calderon says he has not been contacted by investigators, but is talking about what he knows about Teleka in hopes that it steps up the urgency in the case.
He started saying she did everything to the T. Does that sound like Talika Patrick had a mental illness? Her ex husband goes on to say she was a perfectionist. My question is, does that sound like Dr. Teleka Patrick had a mental illness. He goes on to say she was very true hearted when it came to her faith. Does that sound like mental illness to you? He goes on to say her belief in God was rock solid. Does that sound like a woman with mental illness? Now, after saying all those good things about Teleka Patrick, here comes the big dark cloud. Her husband went on to say she started having delusions, but yet she tweeted in a set of tweets that I showed you guys that was dated, or I talked to you guys in another video about some tweets that Dr. Talika Patrick had tweeted allegedly they came from her. But this tweet that she tweeted on July the 21st, 2013 at 5:02 a.m. on a Sunday, this is what she had to say. She said, like I said, if this is not explained to me personally, I am staying away. You don't want to mess up your life. Guess what? Me neither. If I am not directly, personally, and explicitly invited into your life, I will assume that I am unwanted. I refuse to endanger everything I have worked so hard for. I've done more than enough. If you want this, you need to come out of the shadows. It sounds like to me Dr. Talika Patrick was talking to someone that she knew. It does not sound like it's a stranger. And we know for a fact she wasn't talking to Marvin Sapp. Talika X also goes on to tell Target 8, the news outlet, she started hearing voices and she was covering up and fighting so much. He says maybe the voices she heard wasn't God. He stopped in the interview, guys. You can see he take a quick little stop and shook his head and said, pointed to a serious condition. Then he goes on to say, he think, let me say it again. I want y'all to hear. He's telling you what he think. He said, I think that Talika had this fear of first being branded with a mental illness. Key word, branded with a mental illness. Second, the practical fear of losing her career. Then he says, I believe it's a serious concern as he takes a deep swallow and said every day that she is still missing. It's a danger, he says, looking concerned. He goes on to say the tragic. I don't think she's hiding anywhere. Well, we know that to be true because her body was discovered the spring of 2014 in Lake Charles by a fisherman almost 4 months later after she disappeared. Then the ex goes on to say, I think she is being held against her will, or the worse, or even worse than that. It's horrible to think that something bad may have happened to her. He made a statement that he believed that she was being held against her will. And then he goes on to say, or even worse than that. It's horrible to think that something bad may have happened to her. Now we see where the mental rumors came from. They came from her ex because nobody around her ever thought in a million years that Talika Patrick was mentally disturbed. So my question is, was her case closed because of the words of her ex casting Talika Patrick in a bad light and made her look like she was crazy and she was suffering from mental illness? Was he really hurting her or helping her case from this interview? What did mental illness have to do with finding the missing doctor at that time? Why was it important for the ex to reveal what he thought and not what any doctors in America have diagnosed Teleka Patrick with? Why was Teleka's case closed without anyone taking a closer look? And why would she commit suicide at the top of her career? No man is worth losing her career or her life over. She said that or stated that in her set of tweets, allegedly. We will keep digging into the unsolved case until every rock is overturned. We must find who's responsible for Dr. Teleka Patrick's demise, who brought fear to her front door, who wanted to destroy her career and brand her as having mental illness, who catfished Teleka into thinking that Dr. Marvin Sapp was in love with her or wanting to be with her, who used social media to put fear in her. It had to be someone who wanted to ruin her before the public eyes. More content dropping soon.